A special guest speaker. Happy to see
That
you
is
here.
certainly that is certainly an interesting way to put it. Yes, our very, very special guest speaker.
Ganyo.
Oh, welcome, welcome.
Hey, buddy.
Hello, hello. I can already tell this is going to be a fun one.
Yes. So let's get started. So, hi, this is Crypto Mystic welcoming you to Pandora's Box official AMA on September 28th, 2022. Thank you so much for joining us. Um, First thing I want to say is that we've mentioned previously to you that we have been in conversation with some high level players in the crypto space. These conversations are deepening and getting really interesting for us and our what we're working on. So at the moment, we just wanted to let you know that we're not able to divulge names or specifics. However, as soon as we're at liberty to do so, we'll give you updates, information, just as soon as we can. So we just thank you so much for your patience and know that there's some pretty big magic happening behind the scenes. Okay, so as you know, this week's discussion topic is if you were a crypto investor, what would make you invest in a project? What do you think are the most important cornerstones of a project? And what are your biggest red flags? So we have, as I mentioned at the beginning of this call, a very, very special guest. His name is Ganyo. You've heard him before if you've been on some of our AMAs because he pops in and asks very interesting questions, and he also has a great sense of humor. So he's going to be speaking on this topic today, and I'll add a little bit of more formal introduction to him. For him, he is a networking specialist and crypto investor with several years of experience working with promising on-chain startups and projects. He operates within the DeFi sectors and focuses on an adoption-based approach to researching projects that he believes are worth supporting. He has had a long history of searching for projects and came across Unbox on our very first AMA while searching for calls to listen to. And the story I heard from that, I wasn't on that call, but Ganyo, tell me if this is correct. You came on and you really were, I don't know if roasting is the right term, but you were grilling the team with questions. And it turned out you were surprised by some of the answers, and you're like, "Huh, I better watch these guys." Is that true? Is the legend true?
I can confirm that perhaps certain elements of the legends were true.
Okay. Well, welcome. We're so delighted to have you.
I'm delighted to be here. Many of you will already know me. You may recognize me by my voice even. I come into AMAs consistently and I try to do my best for them. I've worked on multiple projects before, so from an insider and outsider perspective, I can tell you what project developers are really trying to find for themselves. And from an outsider perspective, I can tell you what I'm looking for when looking for potential long terms. So I believe I'm here today to speak about why I would invest in a project and what are the most important cornerstones. And that's a very, very big question to ask, especially when it comes to red flags, considering DeFi.
Hmm.
So let's start off by telling you about my journey to this AMA. Now, first off, I this came out of the blue for me. I got a message from the team who I've been speaking to for quite a while now. And the very first thing I thought was this has to be a trap. This has to be a trap for all the times that I've singled out Dorian in AMAs, that I have that I have grilled the team, that I've sort of started messaging them randomly when they were asleep, for all the times, probably from Joe, from all the times that I slipped into Suryan's DMs without giving her a notice. So that was my first thought when I received that message. The first thing that popped through my head. I didn't say it then because I knew that, that probably wasn't the case. but I would
True,
say it's
true.
a very big factor in why I'm here today.
That's
So the
interesting.
roaster has now become the roastee, I believe, is the case here, because I'm going to get
We
quite a
shall
few
see.
questions. My good, it's certainly quite the role reversal. And I appreciate the team for taking the time to listen to me ramble on for all those long months and potentially hear me ramble on for quite a few years moving forward. But I digress. Let's get into the main meat of the topic and see how this unfolds, because I am now in the lion's den, and unfortunately, there is no way out of this. So, if I were a crypto investor, what would make me invest in a project? The answer to that is it depends. And it depends on a variety of factors. The most complicated thing about investment in DeFi or even investment in stocks, Forex, or even deciding whether you should loan someone $5 to go out and get some extra gas for their car is very simple. You need to know that person. And it's very, very difficult to get that information unless you've actually had a heart to heart conversation with them. I'm not talking about listening in on AMAs or anything of that nature. You need to understand them as a person because they, at the end of the day, are going to make the decisions for the project. And a few of the core messages I would have in terms of what would make me invest in a project is that, well, it's the wrong question. For one, I would invest in the person. If that person came to me and said, I have this many years of experience working in crypto, working in this industry, I'm starting a project because of these reasons, it's a very sensible basis and a foundation for investors to focus on. So once that's out of the way, once you've decided, yeah, this is a person I could definitely work with. So in my experience, it's best to work with people who've had STEM jobs because they're very logical thinkers. It's best for me to see people on the team that have specific specialties or proven history in the space. And that's an obvious thing. But you need to check what that history is. So, for example, if someone has a history of marketing for projects that are pump and dumps or low caps, then it's most likely not in your best interest to stay in that project for very long. If they have a spotty history with some wins and some successes, then you know it's a higher risk investment, but something that could potentially play out well in the future, assuming that market conditions are in your favor and that they have a new strategy to bring to the table. And if it's someone with a stellar reputation, you should have actually more risk than, say, someone who has a spotty reputation, because that means that those individuals, because let's face it, this market is very unpredictable, and the chances of someone having a stellar reputation is minuscule, to say the least. That's what I would say. So if they have a spotty reputation, fine, the risk is there. If they have a stellar one, they're definitely hiding something. And that really leads to why you need to take a very broad approach to projects. And that's really only the first point for investment. You need to understand the people behind them. You need to understand their mindset, how they work, what level of experience, real life experience they have before you even consider the Web3 and crypto stuff. You would not lend $5 to a stranger. Why entrust 500 to someone you barely know over the internet? The second thing that I would say is a very important factor as to why people should focus on really the project is the industry or sub niche that that project focuses on. So, as you know, there have been a lot of projects with a lot of well meaning intentions out there. And everyone seeks to drive technology, to drive adoption, to enter a new industry, or perhaps to set a new standard. And within each of these, you have people who claim that they are going to change how staking works, that they are going to revolutionize, say, the green energy industry, or that they will work on improving security, or maybe their contract has a new special function that works. This is another key factor of investment. You need to understand the foundation of the project itself. Now, This connects a little bit to utility, but what I mean by foundation is the key sort of areas which it operates in. For example, we all know that in early 2022, I believe around March to May of this year, miners were back in action, especially on the Binance Smart Chain. And they had lost popularity actually very, very early on from 2018 to 2019 in the Binance Smart Chain because they are essentially what you would refer to as a Ponzi scheme. Money comes in, but it is a pyramid. The first person who came in, who keeps compounding, is the one who comes out with profit. And the later you are, the more difficult that is. So BNB miners by were no means something rare or something to be, something to be praised. But regardless, the project Baked Beans pulled in 10,000 BNB in less than 2 weeks of operation. And that was their TVL alone. To this day, regardless of the bear market, the devs of that have accrued over 3,000 BNB for themselves. It's a very difficult world and a very difficult ask of people if you do not understand what you are getting into. Reflections contracts, for example, have their own niches. Rewards contracts, you need to figure out a way around the cells, and most people understand that when you're rewarding another token and you're seeing all those cells, it's a detrimental psychological effect for buyers. And it's the same concept when you are going forward and, trying to start a rebase token where the supply increases ad infinitum. And you have the problem of really knowing how much is my token going to be worth in a year if I were to hold this for a long period of time. And I am conducting experiments on that based on the most stable sort of rebasing platforms that I can. And this is just the contract itself. We're not even talking about utilities yet. And if you add that to the team, there are really very, very few good projects that are out there. It's sort of like a multiplier of probability. You start with the team's attitude, and then you multiply that by how good the project is, and then you check the utility. Now, the utility part is very, very interesting because, again, it depends on the industry or the sub niche that they want to work in and how feasible that is. And that's really what I focus on. Feasibility in the DeFi sector, in crypto, really in any industry is the most important thing, and saturation is another. When projects put out a product, say, for example, I don't know, there's a very famous one going around now where everybody's trying to create their own launchpad. The problem is that there already exist launchpads, and it all comes down to volume. So adoptability is very low for new launchpads that come out just because they're unheard of and just because there are far too many competitors to really take a space in that market. And that's why unique ideas and smart ideas are very, very, very valued in this space. Because if you can create something that nobody else can, and nobody else will be able to replicate, or at least have a very, very difficult and costly time to replicate, you will be part of a leading industry. You will be part of something that essentially embodies the idea of DeFi, which is the bleeding, the cutting edge. And that's where you get larger investors. So we know utility is very important. And we know that with utility, the overall goal really at the moment is adoption. It's to bring that utility in the real world, to essentially put out a product that can stand on its own 2 feet. And hopefully bring a little more attention to the crypto industry, to ledger technology, DLT especially, and what blockchain can do to revolutionize the industries that people typically take for granted. So, for example, if we were talking about international trades, it has to go through 15 to 20 intermediaries, jumping from country to country, border to border, bank to bank, in order to reach the other person. You'd have to pay £30, or about, at current price, $31 because of what's been happening recently. And it's a very, very harsh reality when you realize that through even a Bitcoin network, you could make the same transaction for $2 for the same amount and have it arrive in a minute instead of 3 days. That's the kind of innovation that a lot of projects really fail to bring. They fail to understand the foundation, and as a result, their foundations are weak. So that's the important thing that I'd say for utility. I'd speak about it a lot more, I suppose, but the important thing for utility is it has to be unique. It has to be something that sticks to the tenets of what crypto is. It's a form of decentralized finance. It's a form of ensuring that we have security, that we have safety, that we are able to tackle fraud, that we have an immutable, unchangeable ledger. And it's about making sure we have sovereignty over our own assets. That is a very big task, especially if you think about a lot of the utilities that people claim they will be doing, like launchpads. It's just creating more projects. It doesn't really feed back into the foundations. And foundations really are where people should be focusing on. Because currently we are about, I'd like to say, 2-3% of the world is in crypto. That means 97% of the world is not. And even if we were looking at a reasonable market share, we'd be looking at maybe 15-16% of the world. That is still magnitudes more than we have now. And once we reach that stage, that's really where the revolution begins. That's where people start thinking, hey, if I take charge over my own assets, even if I don't invest and have control over it, then I am freer now than I have been before. So, with that in mind, I think utility is one of the most key aspects to ensuring that a project survives. It's not only about products, but about sustainability. It is about ensuring that, you're not going to get called out for being a Ponzi scheme. And most of all, it's about actually bringing something of value to the space. Now, I'm not calling out meme coins or shit coins by any means. Those are useful and those have an entirely different criteria as to what would make me invest in them when I feel that I need to. But utility is king when you want a project that you can sit down after a long day and just listen to chat, leave, and then come back 2 months later and still be perfectly happy with whatever position you're in. It is a sense of safety and security in a very volatile and very dangerous part of the financial world. And at the end of the day, value really comes from what they bring into the ecosystem, the wider ecosystem, not just theirs. And that's why I like Unbox so much. It's because not only is Suryan my favorite mascot here, but it's because there is value in what is being brought to the table. It's not just a rehash of what is being out there. It's something that's truly unique, something that I haven't found through my many, many hours of searching through projects for the past 3 years, basically, searching through projects, finding where they stand, deciding whether on the very basis of foundational analysis that they're a good thing for me to enter, or at least something for me to consider. It hits all the criteria. It fits the foundational basis: security, safety, adaptability. It is something that I feel is going to do very, very big things in the future. And that is a one in a million project. I can tell you that from my perspective because I keep a log of the.
Ganyo, your microphone, you're going in and out.
My
There we
apologies.
go. There we go. You're back. You're back.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, so that is why essentially I'm so focused on Unbox that I show so much support and attention for it. It's because it hits every criteria that you could possibly want out of a project. It hits the criteria of being feasible, which means that this is something that could actually go to market and make its community very, very happy indeed. It's something that has value behind it because it protects the fundamentals of what DeFi is. It gives sovereignty to people. And most of all, it's adoptable. It hits the major criteria for what utility should be instead of what people expect utility to be. Similar projects, and I say this with all love in the world, are, say, PancakeSwap, which really in reality was a copy of what was happening on Ethereum. We could say 1inch. These big projects got to that stage because they brought something new to the table. Bitcoin got to where it was on account of being first, which is why I prefer Ethereum. So at the end of the day, utility is one of the most key indicators of value behind any project. Because without that, without the opportunity to seek, returns outside of, their own community, there is no value in a project. There is no value in it. There is only taxes. And at the end of the day, nothing really gets done in the space. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah,
Thank you for that. That's really well put. And I was writing note as you were speaking, and when you started enumerating the different aspects of the utility, safety, sovereignty, uh, relieving fraud, or remediating fraud, all those things. And I was like, oh, that's what we're doing. So it's
yeah,
very
I,
insightful
I,
of you.
I had to slide unbox in there. I definitely had to slide unbox in there because let's face it, when it comes down to what is happening in the world, I think it's such an essential piece of tech and such a nifty little thing as well. So
Thank you.
I believe I have one more section to cover, which I will go through rather quickly before we get to the questions bit. But
Sure.
what are my biggest red flags? Uh, so this is an interesting one. Because it varies from industry to industry. Again, if somebody came to me and told me they were doing a renewables project, they were launching with a liquidity of 1,000 BNB, they were they had the land ready, I'd ask about the team. Because if none of them know any legal help or a lawyer, or they don't know a conveyancer, or they have issues with locating and supplying that energy, then it's an immediate no for me at that stage. Even if I could possibly get in at the lowest price, because the team are not prepared to go to market. If it was a project that was, getting a lot of hype across the space, getting a lot of attention for their legendary use case, and I see it, and because of my years in crypto, I've actually seen something similar to it, I would say no, because it's already been done. And I've done that before, actually, a couple of projects. I won't put names on these ones because they weren't as successful, but I'm glad it was one of my red flags because as soon as they put that project out, it took them about a day to drop 10x, or about for those who don't like the X system, 1,000% below their pre-sale price. It is a brutal market, and this was during a bull run. In fact, it was during the 2020 bull run. That's another factor that I don't like. Repetition leads to failure, especially when it comes to crypto, especially for those who know. Another thing I don't like with projects, and this is a big one, is if they launch through pink sale. Now, I say nothing about the individuals who work there. I've spoken to a few of them. They're very agreeable people. But the core issue remains that once a platform gets popular enough and that platform tends to lean towards the wrong crowd, I'd say. And I mean this by people who just want to get in for the profit, just want to get in quickly. They're not interested in the project, and this is exacerbated. I tend to shy away, and if I truly believe in it, I'll probably buy after the sort of first couple of days, see where I'm at, and then go from there. A very big red flag. I think this is going to be my final statement on this, and probably the biggest red flag I have when it comes to investment is yourself. And most of the time, this doesn't really follow the question, but your biggest red flag will always have to be yourself. You're the only one that can make decisions regarding your own finances. That's what's meant by sovereignty at the end of the day. You're the one making the decision, and therefore you're the biggest red flag there is. No matter who it is, no matter what project you're putting money into, the fact that you are doing it means you are the biggest problem. And that does mean control over your own emotions. It does mean being able to make wise decisions, not based on whether your friend is the one running it, but on whether it's something that is going to help you in the long run to be part of that community, to be part of that process. A friend could come to me with a meme coin and I would tell him no. In fact, I have told a friend of mine no when they ran a meme coin with about 3 BNB in liquidity. They asked me to be part of the team. They asked me to contribute, and I said no. Because your biggest red flag at the end of the day will never be about the project, the team, or anything like that. It's you. Because you are the one that's going to be making these decisions, and as such, you will take full responsibility for them. It's a very, very difficult thing it was a difficult thing, at least for me, to come in to the DeFi space very early on and then in 2020 see Doge pump and realizing, oh hey, I still had that bag of Doge like from half a year ago. I look back and I sold it on the first pump because I thought, hey, it's a shit coin, it's got an infinite supply, it's not going to be something that I worry about. And then I see another coin called Shiba Inu. Now this was back in January of 2020. I bought it in then, and then 4 months later, I just realized, holy hell, my bag just 10,000x'd, 100,000%. Back then, I didn't have the understanding that I did now of the industry, and I was unbelievably lucky when that happened. But that's not the case for a lot of the shitcoins out there, and I promise you, I have made a lot of bad decisions since then. You put your support behind a project. It turns out, even though the team is doxed, there is going to be issue A, B, or C. They aren't delivering. They aren't putting out the utilities. It's causing fear, uncertainty, doubt. But at the end of the day, I chose to disregard the biggest red flag of them all, which was me, and I put money into the project. Everything we do in this space has a risk. Everything has value. And I don't discourage people from doing meme coins or utility projects, but at the end of the day, you individual investors, not talking to a whole community, but I'm talking to individual people, have to be the ones that make the hard decisions. And at the end of the day, that's going to be your biggest red flag. That's me done, Mystic. So I'll pass off back to you now.
Thank you so much for that. I loved how you were just going through essentially what I would call your framework. That you have a process to analyze projects, and you have, okay, first you got the team, then you've got the team and their experience and their ability to fulfill on what they're saying. You've got the industry, right? What kind of a token are they building or coin? And then you've got, of course, the you talked about the feasibility in the space. Like, has it been done before? Is it new? Can it be actualized? And then you've got your red flags. So Thank you for that. That was extremely valuable. I was taking lots of notes, and I definitely want to open up to questions from our community. I have a few questions, so I'm going to open it up. See if anyone has questions. You can raise your hand and talk on the AMA or type it into the chat. Does anyone have questions right now? And if not, I'll go ahead and ask my first question, and then you can type yours as we go through. So. You were talking about the team that was at the beginning, and one of the questions that I had around that, as you're getting to know the team more personally, as you put it, and with this culture of anonymity in the space. And not everybody is doxxed, and there's very good reasons, safety reasons for that, I suppose. But has that been an issue for you? How do you circumvent that?
Sure. So the first thing I would say is that doxing means practically nothing in this space. At least it hasn't meant anything for the past 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is because, well, there is very little value in doxing nowadays. And that's why it doesn't matter to me whether a team is private or not. If they have a reputation, I can check through their old projects, sure. If this is their first time, then I will ask that question and I will try to take it at face value. But then my risk level increases regardless because they're inexperienced.
Mm-hmm.
Doxing means nothing because at the end of the day, I could go onto Fiverr and I could get someone to say a script for me on camera, and I would call that my docs. And this has
Mm.
happened many, many times with other projects. Even for
Right.
legitimately doxed teams, they have siphoned millions in cryptocurrency. And I would know because back when I didn't have my process, I didn't have my framework, I bought into one of them. I went from 1 BNB to 14 BNB, and then I held right at the all-time high because I believed that the team would deliver on utility. That did not happen. I walked
Mm-hmm.
away breaking even. And that team was doxxed. They had a headquarters. They were pulling in millions upon millions of funds.
Mm.
And unfortunately, that didn't work either. So I will tell you now, it doesn't affect your process because doxing is about as trustworthy as taking a picture of a random person on the street.
Right. So in this case, the anonymity of somebody's, avatar or just handle, as long as you're getting to know them through the AMA, and then my sense of you is that that's maybe where you start. You discover a team, and then you develop relationships over time. That's what I've seen you do. Is that
Yes.
correct? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That is
Yeah.
correct. And I would tell you, even if you're not the one doing it, even if you jump into a conversation with someone doing it and you listen in, you can generally infer what that person is going to be like under pressure, what they're going to be like. And that's why I always ask hard questions. Part of it is knowledge, but another part of it is reaction. If they're
Mm-hmm.
hesitating, if they're stuttering, I imply that they are probably unsure of the topic, and if it's something that was essential to their project functioning, that's a problem. Obviously,
That's a
you
red
do all the
flag.
basic stuff beforehand, you check their website, you do everything like that. But if they're unable to answer the hard questions now, I wouldn't trust them at all to run a project for 3 days, let alone 3 years, even if
Mm-hmm.
they say they're the most long-term thing in the world,
Right.
because they will give up as soon as the going gets difficult because they realize they're in over their heads. So yeah,
Right.
uh, and end note, doxing doesn't matter. Focus on whether the team knows what they're talking about and build a relationship. Even if somebody else is doing that, infer knowledge from what they are asking and how the team is responding. See
Mm-hmm.
whether they're hesitating. And that will give you your most basic indication as to whether they can follow through with what they're saying.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Thank you for that. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat, so feel free to type your questions. I have a couple more for you, Ganyo, and of course anyone on the team as well. If you have a question, I can. Does anyone on the team or listening in have a question for Ganyo? No? Okay, I'll ask my next question. So one thing that can happen is, like you said, I think that's happened to most of us here, is you see a project, you do your due diligence or not, but you ape in or whatever, and you get burnt, right? You lose money. Hopefully, it's not too much money, but whatever the case may be, you have a loss. How do you rebuild your confidence after being burnt like that? How do what do you have a process for that? Like you just go back to basics and follow your framework again, know that you can't win them all, or do you have any tips for our people in that regard?
Oh, yes, I do. So I spoke earlier about a project where I put in 2 BNB and came out with 14. And I held it ATH and it crashed. I broke even, thankfully. And this was a more recent case. As I said, the team has had millions in funding at this stage. And they had big plans for a new swap. They were going to make it sellless for rewards tokens. But at the end of the day, that didn't come through, and it's a really disappointing thing to put your faith in it. I think mindset is very important when you come into projects at the end of the day. It comes with a little preparation and it comes with difficulty as well. Now, what I would say, if you want to build your confidence back up after a horrible rug, is first and foremost, before you even put money in it, you should have considered that this is money that you are fully 100% ready to lose. That mitigates the majority of the effect of losing a crap ton of cash. If you're putting in money that you believe is essential either for future investment or for you to take out and go out to treat your family, to pay for your bills, you should not be doing it, period. And that's, again, leading back to why you're the first red flag and the biggest. So after the event and it's happened anyway and you didn't really consider it, building up your confidence again is difficult because it comes in two components. And people will always, and I mean this always, find either component immensely difficult. The first is building up your confidence in yourself, and the second is building up confidence and trust in other people again. You, after a big loss, and I've had my fair share, I would sit down, I'd not touch crypto, at least for a couple of days, and I would consider what led me to that moment. This is a psychological technique at the end of the day, because what you are trying to do during that period of time that you are not focused on crypto, that you are doing everything else in your life, if you have busy work, do busy work. If you're cleaning, clean. If you just want to hang out with friends, do that. You are trying to rationalize what brought you to that point and finding the issues with your thinking that really got you there. Most people, I think, especially when it comes to meme coins and shit coins, are driven by emotion. They're driven by greed. They're driven by fear. We even have an index for that in crypto. Sentiment is a very big issue when it comes to loss. And when it comes to making money at the end of the day, everybody wants to do it, but nobody wants to lose it. Unfortunately, a lot of crypto is a zero sum game. So, with that in mind, I would say you take a couple of days off crypto, rationalize what led you to that moment. Think back from the moment you first met the project, the issues that they encountered, and really what happened to get to that downfall. If you were rugged, then okay, so let's rationalize. I should have probably looked at the contract myself, or if I didn't have the knowledge, I should have gotten a dev to do it. I find that DeFi at the end of the day is a very blameless industry, as in even if you blame someone, nothing's likely to come out of it, and that won't come until regulation does. And when regulation does, this space is going to absolutely explode because everybody will want in, you know? But you shouldn't be blinded, is what I'm saying, and you should rationalize what brought you to that step in the first place. Because the only real way to build back trust is to understand what you did wrong. To build back confidence, you need to understand what you did right and just focus on what you did right again. Focus on the wins you've had previously and then move forward with a clearer head, understanding and reasoning of why you've done this or why you will do this in the future. Every single time you make a loss that way, on the grand scheme of things, you are becoming better, you are becoming smarter, and at the end of the day, you are learning. And that's really a key lesson of DeFi. You either earn or you learn. So, my advice for those who take losses, for those who do things like that, definitely take the time to sit one out, even if something big is coming up, and figure out why you took that loss in the first place, and use that as the basis for growing yourself.
That's really great. And this you mentioned that how we are our own biggest red flag, tying that to our own personal responsibility. I think there's a lot of people who would rather blame others for their own decisions and actions than take personal responsibility. But what you highlighted is it's so true. If you make a mistake, learn from it, and you become a much wiser, savvier, more learned investor for any next step you might take. So thank you for that. There is a question here from Dreaming Heroes. Dreaming Heroes says, "Hey there, Ganyo. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us and extrapolate on your processing criteria." And the question is, could you provide an example of a launchpad that you feel carries more credibility than Pink Sail? I understand the big draw of Pink Sail is ease and use of accessibility. So what distinguishes some of the other popular services to that protocol in your eyes? Excellent
I'm
question.
very well, Dreaming Heroes, I'm very glad you asked that question, and I'm very glad you put in your eyes at the end of it, because it is a very subjective criteria. It is unique to every person as to what they consider a good launchpad. So let's start off with what I look for in a launchpad, and then I'll get to my example. First off, and this is the most key thing, I'm looking for volume because volume is a big indicator as to whether that launchpad is successful or not. And that's what separates a lot of the newer launchpads from the older ones. So we have PinkSail, sure. We have Pancake Swap. Funnily enough, they do have a launchpad. We have Gempad. We have, we have those larger launchpads like MakerDAO, Starter, uh, Spirit Swap, all on different chains, but all with the same purpose of launching projects. What I would say is that if you were looking for credibility, you are looking for trustworthy pads. You want, you essentially are looking for smart sort of individuals behind that pad. You are looking for possibly the most holistic tokenomics behind it as well. One of the things that you will fear at the end of the day is that a launchpad specifically requests a token allocation every time a project launches, because that's a liability. That will always be a liability. If you have a project with 1,000 BNB raise and they ask for 2% of the entire supply, they burn like 50% of it, then they have running control over a vast majority of assets over you. And that's from the start. Even if you get into private pre-sale, then buy fair launch, they will have a vast position over you because they got those tokens simply by virtue of being the platform that project launched in. That's the first barrier of credibility. It's the tokenomics. The second barrier, obviously, professional team, as I've spoken about before. And I think the third barrier will be not just volume, but where it's situated. As you know, Binance Smart Chain is infamous, or yeah, let's call it infamous, for the amount of volume that goes through it. It's also infamous for scams, rug pulls, bad contracts, and generally really, really bad actors who go around on TG DMing you, asking you for funds from the quote unquote team. And that's the problem. A good launchpad will bring the right sort of people. They will have tokenomics, they will have protocols in place to ensure sustainability for the projects that launch through them. Now, I've named a few examples, and again, this is only my personal opinion, but credibility wise, selection process wise, I would give you the example of Gempad over Pink Sale. I would give you the example of Cookie Swap over Pink Sale. And I give you these because they have learned the lesson that Pink Sale has sort of lost during its run. It got too big, and because of that, the team got a little too used to where they were. And projects were launching and launching because volume was the only thing that really mattered at that point. And once a business becomes volume driven, it stops being client and consumer driven. And that's when quality starts to drop off. So I would suggest that for those who are looking for long-term holds, for those who are looking for smart holds, they go for platforms that have perhaps bigger raises. So, you won't get those almighty 5000Xs or the 20X or the 10X or even the 2X sometimes. But you will get those platforms that look into a project, really care about what's going on to their product, and at the end of the day, focus on what is most important, which is essentially the due diligence and the foundational analysis. That is the core issue that faces Pink Sale at the moment. They're very, very big. And I don't say that as a bad thing because it allows people to launch projects, but they don't inspire confidence because they accept nearly everything. And because of that, nearly everything will slip through. So find a launch pad with standards, find one that has decent volume, and find one that has good tokenomics, because then that will allow you to feel just a little bit safer before you decide to explore these projects.
Thank you for that. Brilliant. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, not really a question. I just want to say that or maybe there is a question here actually. You have some really good points in what you're in your analysis points, but one of the things that I'm wondering a little bit is how would you like community would be one of the criterias of investing in something, and how would you go about doing a sentiment analysis of a community in, let's say, if that question makes sense for you.
It does make sense. I'd respond with another question. How would you measure a large population using objective fact? Surian, I will need you to answer this. I've reversed the roles again. You're getting roasted.
Oh no. Well, I think I have an answer for you there because this is extremely diverse. Yeah,
That
yeah.
would that
We
would
can
be
go
that
anywhere.
would be the correct answer. Yeah, it is extremely diverse, and and that's why I didn't include the community when I was mentioning anything else, because communities change like a storm in the middle of July. One minute it's blowing and there are hurricane level winds, and the next you have a rainbow in the sky, and the next moment there's a fire tornado, despite the fact that it's been raining. Communities change in crypto like people change over the course of their lives, except on a much, much quicker scale. We see this in projects of all sizes and all shapes. They're really bullish on the idea before launch, when they're running their private, they're doing all of that. And then at launch, everyone's like, FUD, 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 there's a problem here. And I'm not saying it happens in every community. And I'm not saying it's down to the team or the management of that project at all, but it happens. That's why community and sentimental analysis is such an unreliable vector. And I'm not saying this because I think communities are weak or that they have issues in how they're built. I'm saying this because they're an unreliable measure for an individual investor. You shouldn't be listening to other people's opinions on, well, your fellow community members' opinions on your own money. If I was to run a sentimental analysis, just to get back to the point of your question, if I was to run a sentimental analysis, I would say that the first thing I would ask is for the owner of that chat, whether they were in Telegram or anything, to click those three little dots at the top and give me the review statistics for how their community has been active and how many members have joined. That gives me the first objective measure of whether a community is growing, shrinking, how many messages are being put, what kind of volume it is. The second thing, I would scroll through chat quickly and see how many of, and these are really useful, by the way, see how many of these heart stickers are on official announcements and pinned messages. That tells me how many people are reacting and how many people are watching that chat. It's typically, I would increase that number by a factor of fivefold because most people just look at a notice and move on. But that gives me a really, really, really good indicator of who's actually participating. The next thing is the sentiment of the messages themselves. So this would take a little more time. I'd take a look at the past 100 messages from today, yesterday, and the day before, depending on how long the project had been out or running its private. And I would take a look at what everybody is saying. And if I'm still not convinced at that point, I won't buy in. I'll wait until the project has launched. I'll give it 24 hours after launch, and then I take a look at the sentiment again. And the first thing that usually pops into my head at that point is, oh my God, I just dodged a bullet. And then I check the chart. And true to form, it's dumped. And if I check it and it says, yeah, we're so bullish on this, let's go, let's go, let's go. Even after 3 days, after they've launched, even after all of this, and the team is active, they are putting stuff out, they are keeping things interesting, they're engaging. That's when I know, you know what, this might be the best time for me to get into this project. I'll wait for the next sort of pullback on price, and I'll get in then. That would be sentimental analysis, and it is so, so, so subjective because some communities can be really quiet and go for 5 million market cap within the first day from a starting point 150K. Their liquidity could multiply by factors, and I know, well, that's a really good indicator that they've got strong tokenomics, that they've done their work, that they're engaging their community, and the community is growing. So if you're ever unsure as to why a community is quiet or why something is not happening or anything like that, just tag an owner in the chat and ask for their statistics. Just a screenshot will do. They've got a couple of interesting graphs in there for those that have seen them on Telegram, and they will tell you how the group has grown and what level of activity has been happening over that period of time. That's your most reliable source. Everything else is really down to your opinion and subjectivity. And again, community is very important. I'll never deny that in my life. I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for the community I've built around me. Not because I've started a Telegram chat, but because I've had really interesting conversations. So to answer your question, Suryan, that's the value behind sentimental analysis. It's subjective, and whilst you can get some objective data, it is very much a wait and see approach, which is why it isn't really in my framework as part of my demonstration as to why I buy into projects, because nobody else should be able to decide my finances for me. That's why I went into crypto. Why would it change, even if I'm part of something bigger than myself?
This is what I thank you for this, how you pointed it, and this was a little bit why I wanted to point it out also, because some of my best investments have like I think it was Warren Buffett. I don't remember exactly who said it. I think it was him. That said that when all hope is lost and there's blood on the streets, that's when you buy. Like some of my purchases of tokens and whatnot has been when everybody is just like, yeah, it's down 97% today, and yeah, fuck it, it's done. Like, but you know that the other analysis, like the idea is strong, the team is still working, there is still value there, right? And but the community is at the point of capitulation. That's when you make real good acquisitions.
Bingo.
Sometimes.
Oh yeah, well, there's the whole XRP thing, but we won't talk about that. Less the whole the fun thing, the better, as far as I'm concerned. He embarrasses all Asians, and I can say that because I'm Asian.
Well, and I would add one thing with the community is, when you're observing the team, you're getting to know the team, right? That was your first point when you're looking at a project, looking at how they're engaging, how they're communicating, what they're saying, what you can get a lot of information as to what kind of people they are, right? Like just by how they're phrasing what they're saying, like what kind of emojis they're using, and just the tone of voice as well. So I would imagine, I suppose it's a little bit subjective, like you said, but you can probably also get a good read on the team members that are in there, perhaps.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
It wasn't a question, it was more of a comment on the community aspect of it, and how, coming back to your first point, which was to look at the team and get to know the team, I would imagine that also looking at how the team is answering questions, how they're communicating, the language they're using, the kind of tone that they are setting in the community can give you a lot of information as to the kind of people they are.
Yes, yes, that's very correct. But I would also add to that, um, the best times to understand what kind of person you're going to be dealing with is when they are stressed. Because I like the older Dodge, with ducks. Ducks are a fascinating creature, a little bit nightmare if you put your research behind them, but they look very serene floating on top of water, but underneath all that buoyancy and fluffiness and beaks, they are kicking hard. They're the very picture of fire under grace, and really, that's what you want your developers to be at the end of the day.
Yes.
You,
Hmm.
you know, even in the harshest, toughest situations where they are working and talking to seven different people at once, they are perfectly calm because they have the mental fortitude to do what's needed. And yeah, that's really the best time to understand what a team is capable of. When they're
Hmm.
getting under fire from FUD, when they are launching, when they are meeting and hitting multiple deadlines at the same time. That's the best time because the moment that you go for it and see what the team is really made of is the moment that's going to shape it. People say first impressions are the most important. I disagree. I'd say first impressions are secondary to how they work under fire, especially if you're going to form any sort of relationship with them.
Hmm. Excellent. Thank you for that. We are at the top of the hour. Are there any other questions for Ganyo and or for the team before we sign off for today? I'm seeing the comment in the chat. Okay, I don't see any comments. I don't see any hands going up. I see some funny banter in the chat, but that can be done after the MA. So I want to thank you so much for joining us. I hope you got some great information, insight, and great value from what our very special guest, Ganyo, shared with us. Ganyo, thank you so much for just sharing your expertise with us. Your years of refining your system and trial and error, and then having a really great framework that we can all essentially utilize to be more successful in our crypto investing journey or investing in general. And thank you to our team. I know we didn't hear you too much today, but thank you, Surian.